The Discovery. The research vessel. Aurora drifted silently through the Veil Nebula, its sensors scanning the cosmic dust for signs of habitable worlds. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before the main observation deck, watching stars blur past through the swirling purple clouds. At 38, she commanded one of humanity's most advanced exploration ships, leading a crew of 60 scientists and support staff on their mission to map the galaxy's outer rim. "Captain, we're detecting something unusual," called Lieutenant Marcus Webb from the navigation station. His voice carried an edge of excitement that made Sarah turn from the viewport. "There's a massive structure hidden in the nebula's dense region. It's definitely artificial." Sarah moved to the tactical display where the object appeared as a green outline against the star chart. The structure was enormous, easily 10 kilometers long and shaped like a crystalline spire. Ancient symbols covered its surface, glowing faintly with residual energy. "Analysis, Dr. Rodriguez?" Sarah asked her chief science officer. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a xenoarchaeologist with silver hair and keen eyes, studied the readings. "The materials are unknown to us, but the energy signatures suggest this structure is incredibly old. Perhaps millions of years. Captain, this could be our first evidence of a truly advanced alien civilization." The Discovery team prepared carefully. Sarah led a small group aboard the shuttle Endeavour, along with Dr. Rodriguez, Security Chief Lieutenant James Park, and Engineer Tom Bradley. As they approached the alien structure, its true scale became overwhelming. The surface was smooth as glass, covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change as they watched. "There's an opening," Tom reported, piloting the shuttle toward a circular portal that had appeared in the structure's side. "Looks like it's responding to our presence." Inside, the structure was even more impressive. Vast corridors stretched in impossible directions, their walls lined with crystalline panels that pulsed with soft light. The air was breathable but ancient, carrying the weight of countless centuries. "These symbols," Dr. Rodriguez whispered, running her scanner over the nearest wall. "They're not just decorative. They're some kind of data storage system. Captain, I think this entire structure is a library or archive." They spent hours exploring, documenting everything they found. The deeper they went, the more complex the symbols became. Finally, in what appeared to be a central chamber, they discovered a series of panels that seemed more recently accessed than the others. "This section is different," Dr. Rodriguez announced. "The energy readings are stronger and the symbols appear to be warnings." As she worked to decode the alien script, the panels suddenly activated. Holographic images filled the chamber, showing star maps, battle scenes, and species Sarah had never imagined. The images told a story of conquest and destruction spanning millions of years. "My God," Dr. Rodriguez breathed. "This is a warning system. These beings were trying to tell someone about a galactic empire that destroys entire civilizations." The hologram shifted, showing a massive fleet of dark ships surrounding planets. The ships were sleek and predatory, bristling with weapons that could crack worlds. As they watched, entire star systems went dark, their lights extinguished forever. "The hegemony," Dr. Rodriguez read from the translated text. "They call themselves the stellar hegemony. According to this, they've been conquering the galaxy for over 2 million years. Every species they encounter is either enslaved or eliminated." Lieutenant Park stepped closer to the display. "Where are they now? Are they still active?" The hologram responded to his question, showing current star charts with ominous red zones marking hegemony territory. The red areas covered nearly half the known galaxy, and they were expanding steadily outward. "They're not just active," Sarah realized with growing horror. "They're heading toward human space. According to this trajectory, they'll reach our outer colonies within 50 years. The warning system continued its presentation, showing the tactics the hegemony used against other species. They would send scout fleets to study their targets, then arrive with overwhelming force. No species had ever successfully resisted them for more than a few years. "Captain," came Webb's voice over the communication system. "We're detecting incoming ships. Multiple contacts, unknown configuration approaching fast." Sarah's blood turned cold. "How many?" "6 vessels, Captain. They're big. Really big. They team rushed back to the shuttle, but as they reached the Aurora, it was already too late to run. 6 massive ships had emerged from the nebula, their hulls black as space itself. Each vessel was easily 3 times the size of the Aurora, designed for war rather than exploration. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Aurora," she broadcast on all frequencies. "We come in peace. We mean no harm to you or your people." The response came in perfect English, though the voice was cold and mechanical. "Human vessel, you have trespassed in restricted space and accessed forbidden archives. You will surrender immediately or be destroyed." Sarah looked at her bridge crew. Lieutenant Webb was pale but determined. Dr. Rodriguez was still clutching her data pad with the alien translations. Chief Engineer Collins worked frantically at his station, trying to boost their engines. "This is a research vessel," Sarah replied. "We were exploring the nebula when we discovered the archive. We meant no disrespect to your territory." "Ignorance is not an excuse," the alien voice responded. "The penalty for accessing hegemony archives is death. However, your species intrigues us. You will be taken for study before termination." That was when Sarah made the decision that would change everything. "All hands, battle stations, Collins, give me everything you've got." "Webb, plot a course through the densest part of the nebula." "Captain, we can't fight them," Lieutenant Park protested. "Their ships are too powerful." "We're not going to fight them," Sarah replied grimly. "We're going to run, and we're going to make sure Earth knows what's coming." The Aurora spun on its axis and dove into the nebula's thickest region. The hegemony ships followed, their weapons lighting up space with deadly energy beams. Sarah's ship was faster and more maneuverable, but the aliens had superior firepower. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported Collins. "We can't take much more of this." "There," Webb shouted, pointing at his display. "An asteroid field. If we can reach it, we might be able to lose them." The Aurora weaved between massive rocks while the hegemony ships continued their pursuit. Sarah watched as one of the alien vessels tried to follow too closely and scraped against an asteroid, sending sparks flying across its hull. "They're not used to this kind of flying," she realized. "Their ships are built for open space combat, not maneuvering in tight quarters." Using this advantage, Sarah led the aliens deeper into the asteroid field. When one of the hegemony ships tried to blast a clear path with its weapons, the resulting debris damaged 2 of its companions. "Captain," Dr. Rodriguez called from her station. "I'm detecting a gravitational anomaly ahead. It might be our way out." The anomaly turned out to be a small black hole, its gravity well creating a natural slingshot. Sarah aimed the Aurora directly at it, using the immense gravitational force to accelerate beyond anything the hegemony ships could match. As they shot away from the nebula at incredible speed, Sarah looked back to see the alien ships struggling to follow. One had been caught in the black hole's gravity and was being slowly pulled apart. "Set course for Earth, maximum speed," Sarah ordered. "And send a priority message to Fleet Command. Tell them we've made contact with a hostile alien, Empire, and they're coming our way." The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. During that time, Sarah and her crew worked tirelessly to analyze everything they had learned from the ancient archive. The picture that emerged was terrifying. The stellar hegemony had conquered thousands of species, turning entire worlds into slave colonies or mining operations. "Their pattern is always the same," Dr. Rodriguez explained to Sarah in her ready room. "First, they send scouts to study the target species. Then they arrive with a massive fleet and demand surrender. If the species resists, they're completely destroyed as an example to others." "What about the species that surrendered?" Sarah asked. "Enslaved. Their world stripped of resources, their people used as workers until they're no longer needed. Then, they're eliminated anyway." Sarah stared out the viewport at the stars ahead. Somewhere among them was Earth, home to 8 billion people who had no idea what was coming their way. "There has to be something we can do," she said. "Some way to fight them." Dr. Rodriguez hesitated. There was one thing in the archives, a species called the Corvani. They lasted longer than most against the hegemony, about 40 years before they were finally defeated. What made them different? They didn't fight the way the hegemony expected. Instead of meeting them in large fleet battles, they used hit-and-run tactics. Small groups attacking supply lines, guerrilla warfare in space. They couldn't win, but they made the hegemony pay a heavy price for every system. Sarah nodded slowly. We'll need to warn Earth, get them to start preparing defenses. But more than that, we'll need to change how we think about warfare in space. When the Aurora finally reached Earth, Sarah found herself standing before the United Earth Defense Council, presenting the most important briefing in human history. The room was filled with admirals, generals, and politicians, all struggling to comprehend the magnitude of the threat. Ladies and gentlemen, Sarah began, we are not alone in the universe, and we are in grave danger. She told them everything. The ancient archive, the stellar hegemony, the scout ships that had pursued them. She showed them the holographic records of destroyed civilizations and enslaved worlds. How long do we have? Asked Admiral Catherine Morrison, the head of Earth's Space Forces. Based on their expansion rate and the distance to our outer colonies, perhaps 50 years before they reach human space. Maybe less if they accelerate their advance. The room erupted in discussion. Some argued for immediate evacuation of the outer colonies. Others wanted to try diplomatic contact. A few suggested hiding, hoping the hegemony would pass humanity. But General Marcus Stone, the gruff commander of Earth's ground forces, had a different idea. 50 years, he said, standing slowly. That's enough time to prepare, to build defenses, to train our people. You can't be serious, protested Senator Williams. Did you see those ships? Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. Maybe, Stone replied, but they've been fighting primitive species for millions of years. They've never faced humans. They have no idea what we're capable of when our backs are against the wall. Sarah felt a spark of hope. The general was right. The hegemony expected species to follow predictable patterns, fight a few large battles, then surrender when defeat became inevitable. But humans had never been predictable. What do you have in mind, General? Admiral Morrison asked. Stone walked to the tactical display, studying the star charts. We don't meet them head-on. We make them come to us, system by system. We turn every world into a fortress, every asteroid into a weapon. We make them pay such a price for every light year that they'll wish they'd never heard of humanity. As the meeting continued late into the night, Sarah found herself thinking about the scout ships that had pursued them. They had been powerful, advanced, seemingly invincible. But they had made mistakes in the asteroid field. They had underestimated human ingenuity and determination. Perhaps General Stone was right. Perhaps 50 years was enough time to prepare a surprise that would shock the galaxy. The stellar hegemony was coming. But they had never faced an enemy like humanity before. The reckoning 53 years had passed since the Aurora's desperate escape from the Veil Nebula. In the Grand Chamber of the Hegemony Council, Supreme Overlord Vexhai listened to the reports from the frontier with growing irritation. The chamber was a marvel of alien architecture, its walls carved from a single, massive crystal that pulsed with the heartbeats of 1 billion conquered worlds. Explain to me again, Vexhai demanded, his voice echoing through the chamber, how a primitive species has delayed our advance for 3 years. Fleet Commander Zarthek, a battle-scarred veteran of 1,000 conquests, stood before the crystal throne. His multiple eyes reflected the light from the chamber's walls as he consulted his tactical display. Supreme Overlord, the humans refused to follow established patterns of resistance. Our initial scouting reports indicated a typical Level 3 civilization, limited faster-than-light capability, basic energy weapons, no significant military threat. And, yet, Vexhai interrupted, 3 of our advanced fleets have been severely damaged, and we have gained control of only 12 human systems out of nearly 200. Continue. Zarthek activated a holographic display showing the human territories. Red zones marked hegemony victories, but they were scattered and incomplete. Yellow zones showed ongoing battles, while vast areas remained green, indicating human control. The humans have abandoned conventional fleet warfare entirely. Instead of defending their worlds with massed ships, they evacuate civilian populations and turn entire systems into weapons. They mine asteroid belts, weaponize gas giants, and convert civilian infrastructure into military assets. Another council member, Science Director Morden, leaned forward in his crystalline seat. Surely their industrial capacity cannot sustain such losses. That is the disturbing part, Zarthek replied. Our intelligence suggests they have been preparing for exactly this type of warfare for over 50 years. Every human world we have encountered is fortified beyond all rational expectations. They have turned their entire civilization into a military machine. Vexhai's eyes narrowed. In his 2,000-year reign, he had overseen the conquest of over 800 species. None had ever presented such organized resistance. "Show me the Kepler incident," he commanded. The holographic display shifted to show the Kepler system, a modest cluster of rocky worlds around a yellow star. What should have been a simple occupation had turned into a nightmare that lasted 8 months. The humans evacuated all civilian populations before we arrived, Zarthek explained. What we found instead were automated weapon platforms hidden throughout the system. Asteroid mining stations converted into kinetic bombardment weapons. Even their agricultural satellites had been turned into explosive devices. The display showed the battle in fast forward. Hegemony ships advanced on what appeared to be empty worlds, only to be attacked from all directions by weapons that seemed to emerge from the planets themselves. Mountains split open to reveal massive railguns. Ocean floors concealed submarine fleets armed with fusion torpedoes. The worst part, Zarthek continued, was when we finally thought we had won. We landed occupation forces on the primary world, only to discover that the humans had honeycombed the entire planet with tunnels. Every building, every street, every natural formation concealed fighters who knew the terrain better than we could ever hope to. Morden studied the tactical data with growing concern. Their losses must have been catastrophic. No species maintained such resistance after losing 80% of their forces. That is what we thought, Zarthek replied grimly. But the humans we captured spoke of something they called acceptable losses. They seemed to believe that trading their lives for damage to our forces was not just acceptable, but desirable. This statement sent ripples of unease through the council chamber. The hegemony strategy had always relied on the fact that most species valued their own survival above all else. When faced with overwhelming force, they surrendered rather than face extinction. Perhaps, suggested War Master Keith Var, we should simply sterilize their worlds from orbit. End this resistance permanently. Vexhai considered this option, but Zarthek shook his head. We attempted orbital bombardment at the Ross system. The humans had prepared for this as well. They had hidden their most valuable assets deep underground and in heavily shielded space stations. We destroyed the surface of 3 worlds, but the human defenders continued fighting from subterranean bases for months afterward. The Supreme Overlord rose from his throne, a gesture that commanded absolute attention from the Council. What you are describing is impossible. No species fights to extinction when faced with superior force. There must be some weakness we can exploit. There is one possibility, Morden said hesitantly. Our xenobiologists have studied captured humans extensively. They believe that humans may have an unusual psychological trait. Where most species are driven primarily by self-preservation, humans appear to be motivated by something they call spite. Spite? Vexhai asked. The desire to hurt an enemy even at the cost of one's own life. It appears to be a fundamental part of their species' psychology. When faced with an enemy they cannot defeat, instead of surrendering, they focus entirely on causing maximum damage before they die. The council chamber fell silent as the implications of this revelation sank in. If humans were literally willing to fight to the last individual rather than surrender, the conquest could take centuries and cost the hegemony more ships than they had ever lost in all their previous wars combined. There is more, Zarthek continued, reluctantly. We have detected massive construction projects in their core systems. Based on energy signatures, they appear to be building weapons on a scale we have never encountered. What kind of weapons? Vexhai demanded. Unknown. But the power requirements suggest they are preparing something that could threaten our capital ships. perhaps even our fortress worlds. Meanwhile, in the Sol system, Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of Olympus Station, watching the final preparations for Operation Last Stand. Now 73 years old, she had spent more than half her life preparing for this moment. The discovery in the Veil Nebula had changed her from an explorer into humanity's chief military strategist. "Status report, General Park," she said to the younger man beside her. Lieutenant James Park had been her security chief on the Aurora. Now he commanded Earth's combined military forces. "All defensive systems are online," Park reported. "The Jupiter battery is fully charged and targeted. The asteroid field mines are armed and ready. The Luna facilities have been evacuated and converted to weapon platforms." Sarah nodded, studying the tactical displays that surrounded them. The approaching hegemony fleet was massive beyond comprehension. Over 3,000 ships, including their flagship, a vessel so large it could swallow Earth's moon. Intelligence. Reports suggested that this fleet represented nearly a quarter of the hegemony's total military force. "They're betting everything on this attack," she observed. "They want to end human resistance with one decisive blow." "Can we stop them?" Park asked quietly. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching the stars. 50 years ago, when we first encountered them, I would have said no. Their technology was centuries ahead of ours. But we've had time to prepare, and they've been fighting the same war for millions of years. They've forgotten what it's like to face an enemy that refuses to give up. The first phase of the battle began at the outer edge of the solar system, where Pluto had once orbited. The small world had been converted into a massive sensor array and communication hub. When the hegemony fleet approached, expecting to destroy it easily, they instead found themselves facing a weapon that defied their understanding of physics. "What are they doing?" Zarthek demanded as his sensors registered impossible energy readings from the small world. "It appears to be some kind of gravitational weapon," his science officer reported. "They've somehow weaponized their planet's gravity well." The weapon fired, and space itself seemed to twist around the lead hegemony ships. 3 capital vessels were crushed like tin cans as localized gravity fields compressed them into dense balls of metal. The rest of the fleet scattered, but the psychological effect was immediate and devastating. "Impossible," Vexhai whispered, from his command ship. "Gravitational manipulation requires technology far beyond their level." "Supreme Overlord," Morden reported from his science station, "our analysis suggests they have been reverse engineering technology from the ancient archives, not just learning from them, but improving upon them." The second phase began as the hegemony fleet advanced toward the gas giants. Jupiter and Saturn had been converted into massive weapon platforms, their moons turned into automated defense stations. But the real surprise came from the asteroid belt. What the hegemony had assumed was a natural debris field turned out to be the largest minefield in galactic history. Millions of asteroids had been hollowed out and packed with fusion explosives. Each one was equipped with simple guidance systems and programmed to ram the largest available target. "They've turned their entire star system into a weapon," Zarthek reported in amazement as explosions erupted throughout his fleet. "Every piece of debris, every natural satellite, everything has been weaponized." But the humans weren't finished. As the hegemony fleet struggled through the asteroid field, Earth's moon suddenly split open like a flower. Hidden inside was a weapon that had taken 30 years to build. The Luna cannon was a magnetic acceleration system that could launch projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. The first shot took out the hegemony's flagship, piercing its shields and armor as if they didn't exist. The second shot destroyed their primary command vessel. The third shot sent the message that humanity would not go quietly into extinction. "All ships retreat to minimum safe distance," Vexhai ordered, his voice shaking with something he had never experienced before: fear. "Prepare to bombard the system from long range." But even this plan was anticipated. As the hegemony fleet pulled back, automated vessels emerged from hiding places throughout the solar system. These weren't warships in any traditional sense. They were converted civilian vessels, cargo haulers, and industrial ships, all loaded with the most powerful explosives humanity could create. "Ramming attacks," Sarah said calmly as she watched the tactical display. Thousands of them, each one aimed at your largest ships. The battle that followed would be remembered throughout galactic history as the Day of Spite. Human ships, many of them piloted by volunteers who knew they would not survive, threw themselves at the hegemony fleet with suicidal determination. Each successful ramming attack took out vessels that represented decades of construction and thousands of crew members. When the battle finally ended, the hegemony fleet had been reduced to barely 300 ships. They limped away from the Sol system, defeated for the first time in their 2-million-year history. In the aftermath, as rescue ships searched for survivors and Earth began to assess the damage, Sarah Chen received a communication from the hegemony flagship. "This is not over, human." Vexai's voice crackled over the transmission. "We will return with a larger fleet. We will reduce your worlds to ash." Sarah's response was broadcast throughout the galaxy, picked up by the communication networks of 1,000 species who had lived in fear of the hegemony for millennia. "Then you'd better bring more ships," she said simply, "because we'll be waiting and next time we'll be ready for you." The message that followed was even more significant. Using the same communication networks, Sarah addressed every enslaved species in hegemony territory. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Force. Today we proved that the stellar hegemony can be defeated. They are not invincible. They can bleed, and they can run. To every species living under their rule, know this: resistance is possible. Freedom is possible. The galaxy does not have to belong to them forever." Within days, reports began arriving of uprisings throughout hegemony space. Species that had been enslaved for centuries began to fight back, inspired by humanity's example. The hegemony's vast empire, built on fear and the assumption of inevitable victory, began to crack. The war was far from over. The hegemony still controlled most of the galaxy, and they would undoubtedly return with even larger fleets. But something fundamental had changed. For the first time in millions of years, they had been forced to retreat. They had learned that conquest was not inevitable, and across the galaxy, species that had forgotten what freedom looked like began to remember. The humans had given them something more valuable than victory. They had given them hope.